So year 5, here's your Marshall Maths facts for today. It's 11 times 5, which equals 55. I've put some examples for you to think about. What mega facts and mini facts can you add to the fact of the day? Hi year 5, so carrying on from our measurement lesson yesterday, we now need to think about imperial measurements. Now this might be something that your parents can help you with because they may know these, your parents or carers may know these things. So there are two main systems of measurement to use. The metric system, which is what we've been using, centimetres and metres, grams and kilograms, but there's some other words as well. You might have put some of these on your mind map. So let's see. So, although they both measure length, mass, volume and capacity, they use different units of measure. Not very helpful for us trying to learn it, but there we are. So, most countries in the world use the newer metric system of measurement. However, a few countries, such as the USA, still use the old imperial system. So here's an example. So in the UK, we use a mixture of imperial and metric measurements, but we normally use miles to measure distances rather than kilometres. So miles would be the imperial measurement and kilometres would be the metric measurement. So there we go, 50 miles an hour was 80 kilometres an hour. British cars have a speedometer that shows on the outside miles and then kilometres on the inside. So that shows us both. In most of the rest of Europe, so if you drive over to France, it'll only be in kilometres, they won't measure it in miles. So, thinking about other things around your house that you might have. So, common metric units of mass, which we've talked about before, is grams and kilograms that you might use when you're cooking. And obviously you would use a set of scales to do that. So, the imperial units that you might have heard of are ounces, pounds and stone. Now we most often use these, I think, when we're weighing people. So if you've got bathroom scales, they might be in ounces, pounds and stone. Some people have weighing scales that measure in imperial, or they might be in both. So there's also millilitres and litres, again, which we talked about yesterday. So you might get 4 litres of milk from Asda, but if you get your milk delivered from the milkman, it might come in a pint. And the imperial units are pints and gallons. So have you heard of any of these before? Did you put these on your mind map? Inch, foot, yard and mile, these would measure length. Can you name any objects that we might measure the lengths of using these? And again, when I think often we measure things in miles rather than kilometres. And then we've got inches and a foot. So you might have a 12-inch pizza, a 50-inch telly. Clothing might be measured in the inches you go round. And then for foot, you might have the height of a person. I think I'm probably 5'4", maybe 5'5" on a good day. You might buy carpets, or swimming pools might also be measured in feet. Then you've got yards and miles. These ones, yards, you may not have heard of. Things like cricket pitches and rugby pitches are measured in yards, or road signs. And then miles you probably have heard of. For a road, often on the road signs you can see them, and there's a speed limit which is normally in miles. So sometimes we need to convert between those two things, between imperial and metric. If we get a recipe and it says 2 pounds, you might think, well, my scales are only in kilograms, how do I convert them? So you might need to do this when you're using a map from another country, if you're out walking. So, 5 miles equals 8 kilometres. This sign means approximately equal to. It's not quite exactly, but for our purposes, 5 miles equals 8 kilometres. So you can have a think about how maybe your distance that you walk to school. What's that in kilometres and what is it in miles? So 5 miles is 8 kilometres. How many kilometres are approximately equal to 10 miles? And hopefully you're looking at the screen, you're thinking, well, I'm going to double it because I've doubled 5 to get to 10. So I'll double 8, which should give you to 16. So how did you calculate it? I doubled it. I wonder what you did to get the answer. So rulers show that normally in centimetres and in inches. This boy is saying, my teacher's asked me to measure the length of the hall. I'm going to measure it in inches. And he's thinking, are you sure that's the right unit to use? So let's have a think about what an inch is. So if you've got a ruler at home, look at your ruler. How many centimetres are approximately equal to an inch? And obviously this isn't to scale here, but you should be able to see that there are approximately 2.5 centimetres to 1 inch. 2.5 centimetres make 1 inch. So you could measure, see, this says obviously classroom objects, you're at home. There'll be loads of things hopefully that you can measure at home. Here's some examples. So you're going to measure the objects in centimetres and then convert it to the nearest ½ inch or inch. And in a minute I'll show you an example of me doing that as well in the classroom. You could measure a pencil, a book, a rubber or a table. You should have all these things at home. Measure them in centimetres and see if you can convert it to inches. And remember that an inch is 2.5 centimetres, so I wonder how you could prove that with your measuring. So when you measure the same object using 2 different units of measurement, you should see that the measurement recorded in centimetres is 2.5 times larger than the measurement written in inches, so you'll be able to do some maths. So 1 inch equals 2.5 centimetres. So 2 inches, again, hopefully you're doubling that and you're going to say to me, well, that's 5 centimetres, Mrs. Oliver. Oh, I don't know why that, oh, there we go, 5 centimetres. So then 5 inches would be 5 times as big as this, wouldn't it? So it'd be 5 times 2.5. Sorry, there's lots of flashing. Oh, that went to 10 inches. So 10 inches is 25 centimetres. So 5 inches here would be 12.5 inches and so on. So you need to remember that there are 2.5 centimetres in an inch. And then you can work out the other calculations. There you go. Mrs. Oliver wasn't reading the board properly, that's okay. So 25 inches for the last one would be 62.5 centimetres. So now I'm going to give you some examples of things that you can measure at home and convert between imperial and metric measurements. Right, so here's a list of things for you to try at home. So I want you to measure some things that you've got around the house, including yourself or your family, and convert them between imperial and metric measurements. So I've thought liquids, probably you've got some milk or some orange juice or some squash. See if you can convert litres to pints or pints to litres. Length, you can measure something in centimetres and then inches or feet. And then the same with metres, obviously depending on how big your object is. If it was you might measure it in centimetres and metres and convert that to inches and feet. And then for weight, see if you can convert maybe how much you weigh, if you've got some scales, from kilograms to pounds, or maybe stones, or maybe back the other way. So I'm going to give you a sheet in a minute which is going to help you convert them, and I'm going to show you a couple of ideas. Right, so here's something you might be able to measure at home. Here I've got a pen, and I've got my inches side of my ruler, and I've got 5 inches. So I wonder, what can you convert that to centimetres? Obviously you can try it because on the other side here, but you could have a go if you can remember first of all that there's 2.5 centimetres in an inch. So my maths I've got to do is 5 times 2.5. So that will give me 12.5 centimetres. And then I could check that, couldn't I? I could check whether I'm right, because I could use the other side and I can measure there. And yeah, that's right, 12.5 centimetres. So have a go at measuring something in your house, inches and then into centimetres. You could measure yourself or measure your family and see who's the tallest. You might need to use feet and inches for that, and then metres and centimetres. You could also maybe have a look at some scales. I've got this ball on the scales. Now, this set of scales is very easy for me because the outside, if you can see on the dial, is measuring kilograms and the inside is measuring pounds. So that's quite an easy one for me there. I can see how much the ball weighs in kilograms, which would be 2040. So I think that's 60. And then, so that would be 60 grams. And then I think that's about 4 pounds. So have a go. Using my ideas from before, what can you measure? How can you convert them?